You've been taught to share, to vent, to post, to explain, to let the world know what's happening in your life, your successes, your struggles, your relationships, your failures, because somewhere along the way you were told that transparency equals connection, that sharing your story equals being real, that telling people what's going on in your life is a sign of strength. But here's the problem: not everyone deserves to know your life. Not everyone deserves access to your emotions, your struggles, your plans, your victories. And the more you broadcast your world to people who don't have your best interests at heart, the more power you give away. Every time you tell someone what's going on, you are giving them data about your vulnerabilities, data about your patterns, data about your dreams, and humans are wired to use information. Even people who don't mean harm subconsciously judge, compare, or measure you against themselves, and the people who do mean harm, they store that information, they wait, they watch, they manipulate, and suddenly, the very thing you thought was building connection is building exposure, doubt, and even risk. It's not about secrecy. It's not about hiding your life. It's about strategic privacy. It's about holding space for yourself, your growth, and your energy. Every time you overshare, you fragment your power. Every time you explain your choices, you validate your actions in someone else's eyes instead of trusting yourself. Every time you narrate your life for others, you allow them to play a role in your story that they didn't earn. Think about how often you've shared something personal, only to have it ignored, criticized, or misinterpreted. How often your plans were dissected instead of celebrated. How often your emotions became someone else's entertainment or ammunition. And yet, you keep doing it. Why? Because we crave connection. Because we want validation. Because it feels good to be understood. But here's the truth: the right people don't need constant updates. The right people don't judge. The right people don't require explanations. The right people show up because of who you are, not because of the story you keep telling. Keeping your life private is not loneliness, it's strength, it's self-respect, it's control. It's giving yourself the freedom to grow without commentary, judgment, or interference. It's creating boundaries that protect your energy and your focus. And here's the kicker: when you stop telling everyone what's going on, you start living your life instead of narrating it. You stop performing, you stop seeking approval, you stop trying to prove your worth through explanation. You start trusting yourself. There's incredible power in privacy, power in mystery, power in showing results instead of explaining the process, power in letting your growth, your success, and your confidence speak for itself. When you stop telling everyone what's happening in your life, you stop outsourcing your validation. You stop giving control of your narrative to people who don't deserve it, and you reclaim the most valuable thing you've ever had: your energy, your focus, and your freedom. So today, let this be the rule: not everyone needs to know your life. Not everyone gets a seat at your table. Not everyone deserves your story. Protect it, honor it, live it fully, and watch how your world changes when you stop explaining and start trusting yourself. Because your life is yours, not theirs. You've spent so much of your life believing that sharing your story, your struggles, your wins, or your plans with others is a sign of openness, honesty, and connection. From a young age, you were told that being transparent builds trust, that talking about what's happening in your life makes people understand you better, and that expressing your emotions freely is a way to bond. But here's the thing: not everyone deserves access to your life. Not everyone deserves to know the intimate details of your thoughts, your feelings, or your plans. And the moment you start assuming that everyone's curiosity or interest is well-intentioned, you give them power over you that they never earned. Every time you tell someone what's happening, you're handing over information. Information about your vulnerabilities, your decisions, your weaknesses, and your aspirations. And humans, even subconsciously, use information. People analyze, judge, compare, and sometimes manipulate based on what they know about you. Your story, which you think builds connection, can become a tool in someone else's hands, sometimes to support you, but often in ways you didn't anticipate or control. Even when someone has good intentions, knowledge of your life gives them influence over your choices because it allows them to weigh in, advise, or critique, whether you asked for it or not. This doesn't mean you should hide everything or isolate yourself, but it does mean you must be intentional about who you allow into your inner world. Strategic privacy is a form of self-respect. It's recognizing that your life, your challenges, your wins, and your growth are not public property. Every time you overshare, you dilute your personal power. Every time you explain your choices to someone else, you make their opinion more important than your own judgment. You risk losing control over your own narrative because others start shaping it for you, even if unconsciously. Think about how many times you've shared something personal only to have it misunderstood, minimized, or criticized. How often your excitement was met with indifference, or your vulnerability became entertainment or gossip. That pattern is not a reflection of your worth or your authenticity. It's a reflection of how freely you handed your life to people who didn't earn that access. When you stop giving away your story to those who don't need it, you stop letting their perceptions dictate your emotions, decisions, and sense of self. Keeping your life private allows you to focus on living it fully rather than narrating it constantly. It allows your energy to stay with you instead of scattering across everyone else's judgment, opinions, or expectations. It allows your growth to happen away from the scrutiny, comparisons, and interference that inevitably follow when you overshare. Privacy is power, and knowing who deserves a seat at your table and who doesn't is the first step in reclaiming that power. When you internalize this, you start understanding that the world doesn't need to know your every move. Your life isn't a performance for approval, validation, or connection. The right people will notice without constant updates. The right people will respect you without explanations. And the right people will show up in your life because they care, not because they were fed the details of your story. This realization is the first step toward protecting your narrative, your energy, and your freedom. So much of what we do when it comes to sharing our lives comes from a desire for validation. We want people to notice us, understand us, or affirm that our struggles, successes, and decisions are meaningful. But Keynote 2 challenges that instinct. Oversharing doesn't create connection. It fragments your energy. Every time you tell someone what's happening in your life, you're giving away attention, focus, and emotional bandwidth that should belong to you first. The more you broadcast, the more you hand over control of your emotional state to others. When you constantly explain your choices, update people on your plans, or vent about your struggles, you reinforce the habit of outsourcing your validation. You begin to rely on reactions, comments, or feedback to feel seen and understood. This may feel comforting in the moment, but it's exhausting over time. Instead of being grounded in your own self-worth, you're living partially through other people's opinions. Your energy is spread thin because part of it is always invested in how others perceive you. You're no longer fully present in your own life. You're performing for an audience that didn't ask for front row access. Even well-meaning friends and family contribute to this dynamic. They listen, give advice, or comment, often without ill intent, but every response, suggestion, or judgment, even subtle ones, shapes your choices. It nudges you in directions that might not align with your authentic self. And when you feel pressure to explain or justify yourself, you're giving them influence over your life that they never earned. Your plans, your emotions, your decisions should be guided first by your intuition and judgment, not by the reactions of others. Oversharing also reduces your ability to focus on growth. When part of your mental and emotional energy is spent narrating your life, analyzing reactions, or anticipating feedback, less is left for creating, building, and moving forward. Your life becomes a cycle of explanation rather than action. You're so focused on telling people what's happening that you forget to actually live it, to feel it fully, and to learn from it in private. Growth happens in the space where energy is concentrated on progress, not on commentary. Consequence of oversharing is vulnerability fatigue. Every time you share a struggle, disappointment, or personal detail, you risk it being misused, minimized, or misunderstood. That risk drains your confidence even subtly and makes you hesitant to trust yourself or your instincts. By keeping certain aspects of your life private, you safeguard your energy and maintain a sense of control over your narrative. Intentional privacy is not about secrecy or isolation. It's about protecting your emotional and mental bandwidth. It's about choosing where to invest your energy, who deserves access to your life, and what deserves to remain yours alone. When you stop fragmenting your energy by explaining everything to everyone, you reclaim focus, clarity, and power. You start living your life from a place of self-reliance rather than validation, and that shift allows your growth, your confidence, and your life to expand without unnecessary interference or distraction. Many of us live in the fear of disappointing others. From a young age, we are taught that making people happy is a responsibility, that saying no is selfish, and that conflict must be avoided at all costs. We monitor reactions, filter our words, and adjust our behavior to keep others comfortable. But Keynote 3 flips this idea on its head. Real confidence is not about being fearless, loud, or constantly agreeable. Real confidence is the courage to disappoint the wrong people. It's the willingness to make choices that honor your needs, even if someone else doesn't understand or approve. Disappointment is unavoidable. No matter how careful, kind, or accommodating you are, someone will always feel let down. People have their own expectations, biases, and limitations, and your life will inevitably intersect with theirs in ways that create friction. Trying to prevent disappointment at all costs leads to self-suppression, overthinking, and a life dictated by the comfort of others rather than your own values. When you prioritize avoiding conflict or rejection, you surrender control over your decisions, your emotions, and ultimately, your confidence. Confidence grows when you stop chasing external approval. It grows when you make decisions based on your judgment rather than the reactions of others. It grows when you understand that someone else's disappointment is not your failure. You begin to realize that the wrong people in your life, those who were comfortable when you were compliant, quiet, or overly accommodating, cannot handle your growth, your boundaries, or your honesty. And that's okay. Disappointing them is not a reflection of your character, it's a reflection of your strength. Consider all the times you have held back. You've said yes when you wanted to say no, softened your words to avoid conflict, or erased your desires to avoid making someone uncomfortable. That behavior was fear disguised as kindness. It was the belief that other people's approval defined your worth. But confidence is built through repeated acts of self-respect, saying no without guilt, speaking your truth even when your voice shakes, and standing firm in your decisions regardless of external pressure. Each time you choose yourself, you reinforce that your needs matter, your voice matters, and your life is yours to live first and foremost. Disappointing the wrong people is liberating. It creates space for the right people to enter and stay. Those who respect your boundaries, who value your authenticity, and who care without conditions are the ones who belong in your life. By accepting that disappointment is inevitable, you release yourself from the exhausting cycle of trying to please everyone. You stop over-explaining, stop apologizing for existing, and stop shrinking to fit the expectations of others. Real confidence isn't performative. It isn't about perfection or constant affirmation. It's quiet, steady, and unshakable because it comes from within. When you learn to disappoint the wrong people without fear, you reclaim your power. You live by your principles, follow your instincts, and create a life aligned with your values. And in that space, you discover that your courage to disappoint is actually the foundation of the freedom, respect, and self-assurance you've always sought. Much of what we do in life is shaped by the desire to keep others comfortable. We lower our voices, soften our opinions, and filter our words because we've been taught that conflict is dangerous. that being too loud or too assertive is threatening, or that standing in our full power will make people uncomfortable. Over time, this habit of shrinking becomes second nature. You begin to measure your worth by how unobtrusive you are rather than by who you truly are. But Keynote 4 reveals a crucial truth: shrinking yourself to make others comfortable only keeps you invisible. Think about how often you hold back. You avoid expressing your real opinions because you don't want to upset anyone. You hide your ambitions, downplay your accomplishments, or minimize your successes to avoid jealousy or criticism. You tone down your emotions, your voice, your presence, so you won't stand out, so you won't intimidate, and so you won't be judged. And while it may feel safer, this constant adjustment erodes your authenticity. Each time you shrink, you're not only keeping others comfortable, you're teaching yourself that your true self isn't acceptable or worthy. This behavior doesn't just affect how others see you, it affects how you see yourself. When you consistently diminish your presence, you start to question your ideas, second guess your instincts, and suppress your desires. Your confidence becomes conditional. It exists only when you remain small, agreeable, and non-threatening. The more you accommodate everyone else's comfort, the less space there is for your own voice, your own growth, and your own presence in the world. You risk losing track of what you want, what you feel, and who you truly are. Shrinking yourself may avoid immediate conflict, but it creates long-term frustration. You feel unseen, unappreciated, and underestimated. People admire the quiet, agreeable version of you, but that version is not fully you. They interact with a controlled, diminished version of your potential. They enjoy your compliance without ever recognizing your strength. Meanwhile, your energy is depleted from constantly editing yourself and hiding your truth. The moment you stop shrinking, you begin to reclaim yourself. You allow your opinions to be heard, your boundaries to be respected, and your ambitions to be visible. Some people will be uncomfortable because they were used to your silence, your compliance, or your invisibility. But that discomfort is a sign of growth, not failure. The right people, the ones who respect your voice, honor your presence, and appreciate your authenticity, will respond positively. Your courage to stand fully in your power changes the dynamic of every relationship and every space you occupy. Shrinking yourself isn't kindness. It's fear disguised as consideration. It's putting other people's comfort above your right to exist fully. When you stop doing it, you stop hiding and you start living. You show up authentically, you express your needs openly, you pursue your goals unapologetically, and slowly you realize that your presence, unshrunk, unfiltered, and fully visible, is not only acceptable but necessary. By refusing to shrink for anyone, you finally create the life, respect, and recognition that were always meant for you. There comes a point in life when you realize that the people who praised you for being nice, patient, or agreeable were not celebrating your character. They were celebrating the convenience you offered. Keynote 5 centers on this hard truth. The people who liked you when you were quiet, accommodating, and endlessly giving benefited from your weakness, not your strength. They didn't love your growth, your boundaries, or your assertiveness. They loved the version of you that made their lives easier, and when you start changing, that version no longer exists. Think back to the times people admired your tolerance, your willingness to forgive quickly, or your constant readiness to help. They weren't necessarily acknowledging your strength or your kindness. They were enjoying your availability, your compliance, and your ability to absorb discomfort without complaint. Your silence became their comfort. Your agreeableness became their advantage. Your overgiving became their expectation. They relied on the version of you who could be bent, reshaped, or minimized to fit their desires, and the moment you began to grow, set boundaries, or assert yourself, that comfort vanished. Disappointing people who relied on your compliance is not a betrayal, it's a sign of your evolution. When you start protecting your time, energy, and boundaries, the wrong people react. They become uncomfortable, frustrated, or even resentful. They liked you when you were small because that version of you was predictable and manageable. The moment you refuse to shrink, the dynamic changes. And that discomfort isn't a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of the fact that they were only attached to the version of you that served their convenience, not the real you. This process can feel isolating at first. You may lose people who were close to you, who praised you, or who relied on you daily. That can be painful, but it's necessary. Growth often requires shedding relationships that were never built to support your authentic self. The people who are meant to stay in your life won't abandon you when you establish boundaries. They won't resent your self-respect. They won't be threatened by your strength. They'll appreciate you for the full, unapologetic person you are, not the compliant version they once knew. The lesson here is that losing some people is a sign of progress, not failure. When the wrong people fall away, you create space for the right ones. People who value your authenticity, respect your boundaries, and celebrate your growth. You stop living to please others who never truly saw you, and you start living for yourself and for those who genuinely belong in your life. Your growth may disappoint others, but it will never diminish your worth. The people who matter will rise with you, and the people who only valued your compliance will fade. Accepting this truth allows you to reclaim your power, honor your authenticity, and build a life aligned with your values rather than with the expectations of those who benefited from your weakness. Disappointment is not rejection. It is a natural part of stepping into your strength. For most of your life, you've been taught that putting yourself first is selfish, that prioritizing your needs, your boundaries, and your peace somehow comes at the expense of love, loyalty, or relationships. You've been conditioned to believe that selflessness is the hallmark of a good person, and that choosing yourself over others is a sign of arrogance or irresponsibility. But Keynote 6 challenges that deeply ingrained belief. Choosing yourself is not selfish. It is necessary. It is the foundation for a life of strength, clarity, and genuine fulfillment. Choosing yourself means acknowledging that your time, energy, and emotional well-being are limited resources. You can't pour into others endlessly without replenishing yourself first. You can't give love, attention, or care effectively if you've depleted your own reserves. When you prioritize your needs, you reclaim control over your life, your decisions, and your growth. You stop bending to expectations that don't serve you and start making choices aligned with your values, ambitions, and happiness. This isn't about turning away from people. It's about turning toward yourself. Many of us confuse boundaries with selfishness. We hesitate to say no, to step back, or to walk away from situations that drain us because we fear judgment or guilt. We worry about being seen as unkind, ungrateful, or disconnected. But boundaries are not a form of rejection. They are a form of protection. They safeguard your energy, your peace, and your ability to engage with the world from a place of strength rather than depletion. Choosing yourself means giving yourself permission to enforce those boundaries unapologetically. When you start prioritizing yourself, the world will notice. Some people may react with confusion, resentment, or even anger because they were accustomed to your overgiving, your availability, or your compliance. That discomfort is not a reflection of your actions. It is a reflection of their dependency on the old version of you. The version that never said no, never asserted her needs, and never prioritized her own growth. Choosing yourself disrupts their expectations, but it also creates a space for healthier, more balanced relationships to flourish. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you stop caring about others. It means you stop abandoning yourself to care for them. It allows you to give from a place of fullness rather than depletion. It allows you to engage with life intentionally rather than reactively. It allows you to pursue your goals, speak your truth, and make decisions without fear of disapproval. Your energy, time, and presence become aligned with what truly matters to you. Choosing yourself is an act of courage. It is a declaration that your life, your happiness, and your growth matter just as much as anyone else's. It is a rejection of the belief that selflessness at the cost of your well-being is noble. It is a commitment to live fully, authentically, and powerfully. By choosing yourself, you set the tone for every decision, every relationship, and every opportunity that enters your life. You reclaim your narrative, protect your energy, and build a foundation for a life where you are not just surviving for others, but thriving for yourself. You've spent so much of your life explaining, updating, justifying, and narrating your story for everyone else. You thought that transparency would bring understanding, connection, or approval. But the truth is, not everyone deserves that access. Not everyone deserves a seat at the table of your life, and the moment you start living for yourself instead of performing for others, everything changes. This isn't about hiding, it's about choosing where your energy goes, who gets to influence your decisions, and what deserves your attention. It's about reclaiming control over your life and your story. When you stop telling everyone what's going on, you start living your life fully, unapologetically, and intentionally. You stop outsourcing your validation. You stop fragmenting your energy. You start focusing on what truly matters: your growth, your happiness, and your peace. The right people will notice. They don't need updates, explanations, or constant reassurance. They will respect your boundaries, celebrate your victories quietly, and stand by you through your struggles without you having to narrate them. And as you stop performing for the wrong people, you create space for relationships, opportunities, and experiences that align with who you truly are. Your life is yours, your story is yours, your energy is yours. Protect them, guard them, live them. The moment you stop telling everyone what's going on in your life is the moment you start living it fully. And nothing is more powerful than that.